Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Judith Jameson, your love coach here in Boston, Massachusetts, but broadcasting everywhere across the U.S. and across the world.
Around the world, yeah.
Around the world. And we are here for another episode of the Judith and Lou Narcissism Show.
Oh, yeah. It's been what it's been for a while anyway.
Who doesn't want more of that? Hey.
Can never get enough narcissism.
Can never have too many conversations on narcissism. And so we want to talk to you this week. We're going to wrap up on how people can move on, because what we're really talking about, what we talked about over the last several weeks, is the summary with a narcissist in your life is you can't what, Lou?
Change them. Can't.
You can't change them. Therefore,
you've got to change, and you've got to change. You've got to leave. You got to decide whether you can live with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what we've been doing here is I've been taking excerpts from this book, which is a really great book. I love the name of it, Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship. There you go. And the nice thing about this book, Lou, is that the beginning of the book talks about the characteristics of a narcissist. And we talked about that a few weeks ago, the 13 or 14 points that a therapist uses to figure out the scale of if this person truly is a narcissist or if they're just a control freak. There's a big difference. But essentially, in that test, if a person hits the mark of 55% or more of these 13, 14 points,
right,
they're pretty much a narcissist, whether you're a clinician or not. But the focus on this book is, let's talk about what narcissism is and what it isn't. Let's talk about the struggles that you've probably had with that person in your life. It doesn't have to be your husband or wife. It could be like your mother. It could be like even be a neighbor,
Could be a boss.
Could be a boss.
Yeah.
Right. And then when the book starts to really get going, it talks about leaving.
Or it could be an in-law.
It could be an in-law. Oh, yeah. Those are good.
That's always fun. Yeah.
Right. And once you recognize these things, as you and I have talked about, and you look at your part, it's really important to figure out, is this really as horrible and damaging as I think it is? Do I have kids or anybody else around me in my life who could also be negatively affected by this?
Yeah.
And I think that's very important when you're thinking about leaving the narcissist and moving on, because I always tell people, if you've got someone who's like over the top, like way more than 55%, check. If you have kids, I don't care how old they are. They can be 19, they can be 5, they can be 36. But you staying in that relationship, I don't care how old the person is, unless they're like 1, your kids are seeing this horrible dance that the two of you are doing. And they're seeing the abusive, controlling behavior of the narcissist. But what else are they seeing, Lou? What are they seeing in me if I stay in it?
Right. They're seeing you submitting to this. And by the way, what you're doing is you're modeling this as a healthy relationship to your kids. Right. They think this is the way things are supposed to be. That there's a very dominant side of the relationship, and there's a very submissive side of the relationship, an abusive side of the relationship, and a side of the relationship that accepts the abuse.
Right. And one of the things that we know that's a fact based on research that comes in over and over with every research project that goes on out there regarding abusive behaviors within the home, the children grow up to be abusive also.
Yep.
And now you and I would, probably maybe 20 years ago, that would have sounded kind of weird to us. Like, like if one of us had an abusive parent, like I would never do what my mom or my dad did. But it turns out the dirty little secret is you can be wired that way and not even know that you're being mean or abusive to the people around you. You think you're just giving them orders, or that didn't sound right. But, you think you're just organizing the day. Like, I'm just trying to get everybody out so we can get to the picnic.
Just doing what my dad did. Just doing what my dad did, or doing what my mother does, just running an organized house.
Right. But they don't see the part about,
right,
because our life, scenarios are going to be different. So, for example, in my childhood, my dad wanted to have really fun, festive, but organized holidays.
Yep.
And he wanted us in the car probably, I don't remember this, but probably by a certain time. Didn't want us to dilly-dally, as he used to say, because Sunday afternoons, the tradition was to go into Boston and visit his parents. And also we would often visit my mom's parents because they lived nearby.
Yep.
But it's all about that control. And, my mom knew her responsibility was to get like the running toddler, my brother, and the two of us, washed, dressed,
Yep.
fed, etc., before we headed out at 1:00. I mean, he wasn't helping with any of that.
Right.
But even though we didn't see it, we saw other things. And mostly what we saw, Lou, was we didn't see him yelling at her. We didn't see him hitting her. We didn't see him most of the time. We didn't even see him like on the nights when he was drunk. What we saw was her jumping like a jackrabbit all the time.
Yeah.
Always doing things and very short tempered, like, and I remember even as I got older, like, okay, that was like over the top, like crazy yelling or spanking or whatever. Like, there's a part of you internally that says, hey, I'm a kid. I never get into a car on time. Like, that's just not a thing, like,
right. Yeah.
But I remember like she had the shortest fuse, but it wasn't until my 20s when I started to sort of unpack, like hearing stories about what had gone on. Right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and you and I are pretty transparent. We share our stories on this show, which is what I love about it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going off to college because that's when my parents, like the whole thing really blew up my senior year. And it's like, whoop, dad's out. He actually moved out of state.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know was dad moved out of state and wasn't paying any child support. Or when he did, it was like literally like $20, which is like, it's almost more insulting. Like,
right,
why even
really.
send anything? Like,
right.
Yeah. So it'd be like $20 here, 15 here, 30 there, like, but not like whatever, I don't know, of course, back in the day, like if it was, say it was like $125 a week for 3 kids in a house, that's nothing. But I remember leaving and going to college going, oh my God, I'm not going to turn back. I'm never going to be my mom. I'm never going to settle. I'm never, and like, this is a list, right? Like I just had this, I was propelled into this, like kind of propelled by like anger at the whole thing. Like, why would anybody stay?
I don't know if it was our generation and whether it's less now or more now, but there was a lot of people in my generation went the opposite of their parents, right? Went to, just decided, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that to my kids. I'm never going to do that to my spouse. That's not the way my marriage is going to run, or that's not the way my life is going to run. And I'm not sure what it was. I mean, our generations of parents were workers. They got up and they worked and they kept the household, and there wasn't a lot of self-examination. There wasn't a lot of work being done on themselves. They were just, they were workers. They were blue collar people and just got up and did the gig every day. So, and I think, like I said, I don't know if it's symptomatic of our generation, but it seems a lot of our generation just said, I'm not doing it that way.
Well, they do
and then
show
ended up doing it that way.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's interesting that you said that, because
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. It's the normal tendency for we humans is to do the opposite in parenting. So if your parents were really strict, which mine weren't, if yours were strict, you're so offended by that as an adult that you're like, you know what? I'm not doing that to my kids. I'm going to let them make their own decisions. I'm going to let them have some empowerment. But what happens is we swing too far the other way.
Yeah.
Typically. And that's a little bit what you're describing. My mom never had a curfew, but in my 20s, when I was thinking about all of that, I thought, it's kind of hilarious because she may or may not have known this, but it was irrelevant because my friends had curfews. So there's no way I was staying out after 11 by myself.
Right. Yeah.
But, I never resented it and I never abused it. But that was a dicey thing.
Yeah, but that was based on your personality, not on her upbringing.
I don't know. I think it was based on her, a little bit of lack of parenting skills right there. Not that any of us
fact that you didn't take advantage of it was your personality.
Oh yeah, but what I'm saying is she sort of lucked out in that way because she kind of went the opposite. So I think her parents were probably, they were like, they had like friendly guidelines. I wouldn't say they were really wonderful people. So I don't think they were the types that were hitting and yelling and, kidding by 8 or not.
my parents had, as long as I didn't come home with a cop car behind me, everything was
Mhm.
fine. And it was a different world because we didn't have cell phones. I could be out all day. They would have no way to get in touch with me. No idea, know where I was.
I know. Remember that back in the
Yeah,
day? My God, we didn't know where the kids were, or they didn't know where we were.
right.
That's
And
crazy,
so
isn't it?
So they were utterly hands off, and it was because they were occupied with my sister largely, who was 9 years older than me, and it took a lot of their attention. And it was like, well, like I said, as long as you don't come home with cops behind you, everything's fine. And I thought it was the best upbringing in the world, but it's not what I brought to my kids. It was
Right.
like because what I eventually learned was it was hurtful and
Mhm.
diminished me a bit, not having their attention in terms of I'm making decisions. I'm making
Mhm.
huge decisions on my own as a teenager that I shouldn't have been making on my own.
Right. Right. It's almost like, I hate to use this expression, but it's like, that stupid expression, but it's kind of true. When people give you enough rope to hang yourself on,
Yeah,
right? There's like a negative spin there. It's like, I'm giving you all this freedom until you mess up. But the thing is, it just never really works well. There's something to do with, like, balance. And I also feel that I think parents go a little too far out of their way sometimes to um over accommodate. Well, little Billy he doesn't do well in that. He doesn't do well in that kind of environment. He's too sensitive, or he's got ADHD. I could never take him to that. And it's like, instead of just labeling a kid, and really what you're doing is restricting them, how about teaching them how to go into these different environments and be more successful with some skill sets that would work for them? But no, it's like, oh no, he can't stand up in front of the class. That would be really mean if you made him give his oral report, because he gets very, very nervous, and
right,
he just can't handle it. And it's like, you know what? Nobody likes that,
right.
right? Or with like homework and things, it's like, yeah, sometimes I think the schools give too much homework, but the point is, like, we all have to do it.
They do, but the whole point is to stretch them a little bit, stretch them an
Right.
appropriate amount so that you
Absolutely.
get them up in front of the class because nobody's comfortable with it. And if you do it, you get comfortable with it. In
Right.
most cases, and of course, there are situations where the person's
Mhm.
never going to get comfortable with it, and it's not the best thing in the world for them. But the idea, a lot of the idea of school is to stretch socially, to stretch education wise, to stretch
Mhm.
social, it's social
Mhm.
anxiety and things like that. Stretch, get in some situations that you're not necessarily comfortable in, because that's how you get comfortable in those situations.
Mhm. Right. And I think one of the summary points to make about this first part of our conversation, where we sort of got into parenting, is it's never okay to have hands-off parenting.
No,
It's never okay to be sort of kumbaya. It kind of reminds me of like berserkerly, I used to call it. That when people talk about, California, the land of fruits and nuts, it's like,
yeah,
yeah, because they are nutty, and they do grow nuts, but they are kind of nutty, where they're sort of that hands off, oh, each kid can make their own decisions and stuff. It's like,
yeah,
but
no.
that's not really guiding. That's kind of hands off means that's just a cop out, in my opinion.
And you're not your kid's friend. I mean, this is
No.
so prevalent these days.
Oh
You're
yeah.
not their friend. There can be some friendship elements to your relationship as a parent and child,
Mhm.
but they are
Mhm.
not your friends, and that's not the role you should take on, and that's not the role they need. They have plenty of friends.
Right.
They need a parent. They need
Right.
a mentor. They need some guidance.
Right. It's like, it's a positive characteristic for a parent to be friendly with their kids, because
Mhm.
what we're really talking about is working on having a positive relationship with them.
Right.
The reason why we do that is because before they launch, which in America is usually between 17 and 19,
Mhm.
before they launch and go somewhere, do something, whatever it is, uh, you want to have this established relationship where no matter how ugly it is, yeah, I might be mad, not gonna lie. I might yell. I might just be venting steam because what you're about to tell me is like really bad. But then those are normal, anger and reactions like that are normal. You know, I'm not going to like throw the TV set at you or anything, but
Yeah.
it's okay. And I think sometimes parents assume that their kids, well, Janie knows that she can come to me. It's like, no,
Yeah.
Janie
No.
doesn't know that unless you say it.
Right.
And when something really bad happens, Janie's not going to go to you. They're going to go to somebody else's parent who they feel closer with, who they have talks with all the time,
Yeah.
or maybe even a teacher.
Yep. And a lot of times your relationship is so positive with the child and is so supportive and so pro the child, they don't trust your opinion. In other
Right.
words, sometimes they need advice and sometimes it needs to go against what they're doing or against what they're thinking. And they want to know that you're willing to deliver that. They want to know that you're going to be honest with them. And they want what we all want in a relationship. They want safety. No matter how
Hmm.
mad you get at me, no matter how much you disagree with me, you're still going to love me at the end of this. And,
Hmm.
we're still going to be okay at the end of this, but we got to go through this. And they want a partner and a parent that they're going to get an honest mentorship. They're going to get they're not going to get overly praised. They're not going to get overly criticized. They're going to be, someone's going to take care of them because that's the thing they want to do.
Hmm. Right. And I think
It's tough. And
instilling,
friendship can be part of it, but there are too many parents, I think these days, I see it a lot, that emphasize the friendship part of it. Oh, I want to be her friend. I want to be his friend. It's like, okay.
right. I know. As I always laugh when I see like moms like to do this. They take their daughters to like spa day, right? And like, what 6-year-old gets a manicure, pedicure, and their hair styled? And it's like, that's ridiculous. I mean, if anything, have your kid have her best friend, even if they're 5 or 10 or whatever, go with them, and you don't need to be there for that. It's like, you know what I mean? Like treat them and a friend to that, and make that like their birthday party or something. But
And I know this is off topic, but how many times have you seen this? I've seen this so often where children get into a situation because social for children being in school, especially in middle school and in
mm,
those ages and stuff like that, it's tough socially. It's a tough environment for them. And what
yep,
happens is if they are too close to the parent, they tend to stay within that relationship and they will not venture out into regular social world of their own age and in middle school and things like that. And you'll see them. I mean, how many times have you seen a kid that doesn't want to deal with other kids? They want to deal with other parents. They're always
yep,
dealing with the adults because
yep,
it's just the environment's just too tough. And I don't mean throw them to the wolves, but they've got to be out there in their own social strata. They've got to develop the skills to handle themselves in their own social network.
mm-hmm, right. Yeah, it's so interesting you said that, because yesterday I was working with a new client up in Toronto,
No, wow.
and yeah, she's separated and going through a divorce, and she has 3 kids.
Well, it's Judas
And
Jameson International now, huh?
yeah, Jameson International. That's a
Yeah,
good one. I like
yeah.
that. And she was concerned because soon to be ex wanted the kids in some different activities. So I said, well, talk about the activities that they've been in. What do they enjoy? What are their, let's talk about their ages and like, what are they doing now? And so basically she said, well, they just don't feel like doing any of that stuff. And I'm like, okay, so in all fairness, because okay, you're my client, but it's my job to coach you. And when
Mhm.
I coach you, I'm going to talk about the different options and the pros and cons of things. As an outsider, and I am your cheerleader, I am on your side, but as an outsider, I don't see what Bob, I'll call him Bob, I don't see what he's doing wrong. I think actually, no
Yeah,
offense, your kids are between 5 and 10 and you have them in nothing. Like I don't think kids should go to something 5 days a week. I think it's ridiculous. These
right.
kids, they go to piano lessons on Monday, they go to the Girl Scouts on Tuesday or the Boy Scouts. Then they go to a soccer thing on Wednesdays, and maybe there's like 2 nights because they have to practice. So, like Wednesdays and Fridays they have practice. Saturday they have the soccer game. Oh yeah. And maybe they wanted to take up like another sport, or they want to be on the chess team. So they do that like on the spare night that we had in there, which is Thursday night.
Yep.
I'm like, time out. Even if you're rich and you have all the money in the world, that is just ridiculous to have these kids going like that. And there's no way that there's hardly any kids out there, unless they literally are a genius. There are hardly any kids out there that can, go to school all day, come home for like a 5-minute break, and then go out to a soccer game and come back, have dinner, relax, have some like,
Right.
half an hour of like, I don't know, like whatever.
Yeah.
Just unwinding.
That extreme is the social equivalent of letting the TV raise your kids. You're just letting activities raise your kids. You just send them
Right.
off. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's insane. I just think it's too much.
And I think kids, if they are reluctant to be social,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether it be activities or just in school itself, they're reluctant because they have problems fitting into those social situations. They're feeling they have some self-esteem issues, and the earlier and the more often you cut into those a little bit, the better off you're going to be. And what happens is when they're at home, and this comes back to the narcissist discussion, because sometimes it happens this way. When you're at home, you're the star. Everything's perfect. You're great. Everyone loves you. You're just praised up and down. When you're out in school, you might not be the smartest kid in class. You might not be the fastest kid on the team or the best player on the team. And sometimes that's tough to deal with after you've been raised as the star. You go out in the real world and you find out, okay, well, there are kids who are bigger, stronger, faster, smarter than me, but that's okay. You have to learn that that's okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. It reminds me, because I know you talked about this growing up, you had a friend's house, but
yeah,
it's important to try to be that house, the house that the kids want to go to.
Yep.
I mean, some parents are like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like little Billy has like 3 or 4 different friends, and usually one night during the weekend, he goes over there for overnights. Well, you should be having them to your house.
Yep.
Because you need to be eavesdropping. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. And find out what these kids are talking about behind closed doors, either in the bedroom or in the family room. I mean, it's kind of eye-opening.
Find out who your kids are outside of your relationship with them, because trust me, they have a life. My son is the perfect example of this.
He's kind of quiet, isn't he?
He's extremely quiet, or he's extremely quiet with me. But I remember we went to.
So would you say he's an introvert as opposed to an extrovert?
Well, here's the thing. We went to the first time this struck me as hard as it did was when we went to his induction to the National Honor Society, and I'm talking with his teachers, and I'm getting these stories, and in my head I'm thinking, you're talking about my son, being the class clown, cutting it up, that type of thing. He has an entirely different personality, away from me, and I don't know. I'm guessing we have a great relationship, so I'm guessing it's not a problem. But he's just they're different people away from you than they are within the household, because, by the way, you put your kids into a specific role and you set up expectations for them and they try to meet them. So maybe what happened was I've expected the quiet Aiden, all along. And so that's what he gives me. That's what our relationship was based on. But I have the feeling that outside he's pretty gregarious and, easygoing guy. I don't think he's talking anybody's ears off, but I think he's going to, he's a different person away from me than he is with me.
Yep, exactly. I forget. Is he still in Vermont?
Oh, he graduated. Yeah. Graduated. And I'll brag, Phi Beta Kappa. Yeah. He came out of it. He did very well. Yeah. Now he's down here. He's, believe it or not, he's working at a psych ward. So,
what does that have to do with his major?
Well, he's a double major, English and psychology.
So what's he doing? Like the midnight watches where he watches someone that's on watch?
Afternoons. Yeah. He's doing some clinical work and stuff like that. It's just his first, it was his first summer job out of college. So, he's finding his way.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to the healing from a narcissist, because I want to wrap it up today. And you and I are going to be having some fun with this. When we break up with anyone, whether it's a narcissist or not, the number one thing I want to remind people about is taking the time to grieve and taking the time to heal. It doesn't matter how bad that person was, or whether you broke it up, or maybe they broke it up because you weren't, like we've talked about, you weren't like filling their need for attaboys.
And another supply became more viable, and probably more, they needed to fish or cut bait on the other supply.
Right. And that often happens the minute you try to speak up.
Yep.
But it's important to remember you need to grieve the loss of the relationship, just like you would whoever you were breaking up with. And then take a look at the assessments of the 2 columns of what did I do well? What did I not do so well? What did he do well, or she? And what did they not do well? So it's that way you can see the columns of it's never 100%, 0%.
Yep.
Right. So we never are not guilty of something.
Right.
Even if we kept the arguments going, like you could be with a narcissist and never win an argument because you can't win an argument, but you may have kept it going trying to win an argument instead of just saying, this is insane. It's like going around in circles. And what's the point? Really? You kept it going.
the key here is to keep a distance between examining your role in a relationship and blaming yourself for the relationship. Because what happens is if you start sinking into your self-esteem issues, which led to you being in a relationship with a narcissist, it's one of the reasons they picked you. You have them. Trust me. If focusing on them is negative and hurts you, but there are reasons you stayed in a relationship. There were things you were getting out of it, and there were reasons you were willing to pay the price to be with a narcissist. Examining them and dealing with them without blaming yourself, because there's no productivity in blaming yourself. Plus, it's not your fault. It's just something you have to deal with. Figuring it out and doing it without blaming yourself and diminishing yourself is the way you need to go about it.
Right. Well, and the way I turn that around with my clients is when they start to feel bad as they're talking about things, because they're hearing themselves say these things. And it's like, they'll say to me, my God, I sound like a nut. Or they'll say, you must be sitting there just wondering, like, why did you stay? Or they might say, boy, I should have broken up with them. I can't believe, why did I stay so long? And I always say, write those statements down and answer them.
Yep.
Write it down. That's your homework. So whatever those negative feelings are, like, oh my God, why did I stay so long? Now you need to answer it. But if you don't put it on a piece of paper, right? Like, if you don't, that's why journaling is so good, because it forces you to write down that statement and then sit there and stare at it for 2 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't care how long it takes, because you've got to write down the reasons. Why did I stay? You have to be honest. I mean, I have this other client.
Well, this is the basis of therapy, and this is the basis of processing. Taking those thoughts and feelings and reducing them to words, whether it be speaking them to somebody else, writing them down in a journal, however it works, that is an incredibly useful process. And it forces you to, when you can just live with feelings and not really examine them. But when you have to reduce them to words, then you start questioning yourself. And that's when, I'm sure when people are talking to you, they'll say, God, this just occurred to me. Why did I stay with them so long? Yeah.
Right.
So that's part of processing. It's an important part of processing, reducing emotions to words and, thoughts and words. Yeah.
Right. But most of the reasons why they stayed are not because they were afraid to leave, in the sense of like their fear of their life. Right.
Right.
There could be that if it was, truly, domestic violence or some kind of abuse, but usually there's all these other things. Right. And that's the things we want to write down. And then I talk about about these things the next time we get together, like usually the next week. Because it's really important for people to learn. We already know all the horrible things that the other person did. They've talked about it ad nauseum. Their friends and family have probably heard it all. I've heard it all. I'm like, but now we need to look at the negatives. And what I say to them is, like, I'll say, give me one or two things that roll around in your head. And it's almost always like, I feel guilty about, or I feel embarrassed about, or I wish I had. And those are the things that come out. And I don't give them examples because I don't want them to go, oh yeah, that's it. I wish I'd left sooner. I'm like, I'm not going to say, is it because you wish you left sooner? Because then they're going to take that. Because everybody wishes they left sooner in a bad relationship. Hardly anybody leaves at the time when they probably should.
Right.
And there's also a very good chance that they didn't listen to friends. I mean, honest to God, I can't even tell you how many times I've probably mentioned it before, but I've had those weird conversations with like other women saying, look, I'm calling on behalf of my sister, or I'm calling on behalf of my good friend. I'm not going to tell you their names, but I just want you to know that your boyfriend is their boyfriend. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is it's very often bigger than just these two people. These men in particular, because men are usually the ones doing this. Men that do that have like two girlfriends going at once, they usually have or have had more than that.
Yep.
And I mean, they literally are diagnosed, if you will. That is serial dating.
Yeah.
Serial dating is when you're dating for a sport, like the thrill of the new dating and, kind of wooing somebody, as we used to say, is kind of a cool thing.
Plus, to put it in today's terms, it's a supply chain issue for a lot of narcissists, keeping that supply lined up. Plus, what their ego and their self-image that they need, the narcissist needs, is fed the most during the initial parts of the relationship. They love that new part of the relationship when people's emotions and feelings are heightened, when they can be the star, when people haven't looked behind the curtain yet, they haven't seen their flaws, they just think that they're the best. So that's the type of feedback narcissists want, right? That early honeymoon phase of the relationship.
Right. Well, it's so funny that you said that. Oh man, you're such a good wingman. Because I was at a meeting this morning, way before this one at 7 a.m. And I was talking about DAVM, DVAM, whatever, I don't know, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That was the month of October.
Mm-hmm.
And in my notes from all my training, I mean, I take weeks and weeks and weeks, well, actually months of domestic abuse and domestic violence training, that there is this cycle, okay? And let's see if it's on here. But essentially, it's exactly what you just talked about. So the cycle of violence is, the whole part of this is that, especially with a narcissist in particular, but with, men, typically men, but sometimes women who are who are, masters at they're manipulative. And the cycle of violence is like a picture of a sun, right? And that's the honeymoon stage, which we all have. We all have that first excitement when we're dating somebody. And the person seems nice. They seem responsible. But then the tension building stage comes in. So you move out of the honeymoon phase, but it's very gradual because remember, a narcissist is manipulative to the core.
Yeah. During
the tension building stage, they take steps to take control. Okay. I love you. Sometimes they move in fast. So like before you know it, they're living with you after like 3 months, and they establish this relationship. And then from there, and again, this is not talking specifically to narcissists, but this is talking to domestic abuse. Then the battering stage. So it's the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse. And after the first time, the abused person turns back afterward and says to the abuser, they're sorry. Like, it's almost like, I'm sorry I did what I did to cause you to scream at me and push me against the wall.
Right.
And then the other person they pretend that they feel sorry for what they did. And they say that they're going to get help, but then they don't. And this is the dangerous phase, because it's during this apology type phase by the abuser that the victim feels like, oh, see, he's not that bad. He's apologizing. He said he's going to get help, which of course you and I know they don't, but he says he's going to get help. He's never going to do it again. And if we had a restraining order, we drop it. If we have a temporary restraining order, we don't even go to the hearing.
Right.
And then what happens is, the longer we're in it, we're back in the cycle again, because it's eventually, now you're back in the honeymoon phase because they're on good behavior for what? A few days, or maybe even a couple of weeks.
Right.
Could be a couple of months. It's, these things can, depending on the person that we're dealing with, the abuse can doesn't have to be daily, which makes it even more sort of disarming, because you don't really know when, like, is it Mr. or Mrs. Nasty or Nice coming in the door?
And that percentage changes as you go along. You get less and less of the good times and more and more of the bad times.
Yep.
And narcissists are really good at returning to that honeymoon phase. You can get a night, and that'll sustain the abuse for another 10 days, 2 weeks, and then something else happens. And they're just very skilled at that.
Yeah.
And you're very susceptible to it. I always have to put that part in. Yes, they are skilled at it, but you've been selected because you are vulnerable to it.
Right. Well, and I think the thing is too, to look back at like what part we play in these relationships when we were, taken advantage of, especially by a narcissist. We accepted their apologies and moved on. But that's not how forgiveness works. It's, I accept your apology. There's some unconditional love, but I also want to see change. And a boundary is useless without a consequence. So this is the boundary. If you cross this boundary again into my space, my comfort zone, the consequence will be, right?
An apology is,
people feel mean doing that.
an apology is empty without a change in behavior.
Right.
It's a required part of an apology, change in behavior.
Right. Exactly. And so again, I think the thing to remember is that it's, a narcissist is just a force that you don't really want to go up against, because you can never win in an argument. They're never going to sit there and say, I see what you're saying, and then actually make the change. They might see what you're saying, but in their hearts, they're like, but I was justified. So obviously it's fine if I sold our house or did whatever I did without your permission.
Yeah, but see, that phrase is the good times. What really happens in a narcissist relationship is anytime you bring up an objection, they punish you for it and turn it around on you. And so what happens is you get into a relationship where you're feeling like, well, I have a concern that I'd like to voice, but I know that's just going to make things worse. So why even bother doing it? They get you into that situation where you're conditioned that every time you speak up or try to change what's going on, things are going to be worse for you. You just get into that position. So you take the path of least resistance and you just cooperate as much as possible and keep your head down.
But that's why the end game has to be a strong, no, I'm leaving, or no, I'm not putting up with this, you leave. And you have to be prepared. There has to be a game plan for this, because you have to be prepared for the ramifications by the narcissist, but the ramifications that we have with our emotions, like, did I do the right thing? Or then you start to blame yourself, like, I should have given him one more chance, and shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's like, really, outsiders, that's when outsiders need to step in and say, look, I love you, and I just have to tell you, you already gave him 50 chances.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get another 50. It's like, and I think with my clients, I always point out, as an outsider, kind of like I did with my client in Toronto, where I'm talking about the father wanting his kids in some activities. I'm like, as an outsider, even though I always have your back, and I'm your cheerleader, not theirs, but I sit back and I say, as an outsider, yeah, you weren't listening to your friends, so that goes on your list. Why did I not leave sooner? I didn't listen to my friends. I didn't listen to my mom. Whoever was saying, you might want to think twice about, like, whatever that behavior was, right? You have to own the fact that you stayed in it and continued to try to work things out, as opposed to draw a line in the sand, right? But so some tips for coping with the end, because it's very important that people sort of grasp onto this. It's an old Japanese proverb: fall down 7 times, rise 8 times. Life begins now. Ooh.
Yeah.
Think about that. So making it through the demise of a relationship with a narcissist can be a harrowing experience. Everything that you believed in and expected from the narcissist gets completely turned upside down. In the beginning of the relationship, you were on a pedestal. Now that things don't please the narcissist, you're pushed off and disposed of, open to more insults, slander, my favorite, and denigration. And I have a client who's actually made some comments on here before, and she's not available today to be watching and commenting, but she will tell you that's absolutely what happened. As soon as she took a stand and said, cut it out. Well, first of all, when she said, I really want to talk to you about some things, I feel like you've got this hardened heart about, a couple of issues, but she tried to word it in a nice way. And 2 hours later, he's packed the bag and left. And she's like, who does that? Like, I wasn't saying let's break up. I wasn't saying I want a divorce. I wasn't saying get the hell out. But because he's a narcissist, he's not going to tolerate any kind of constructive criticism or talk about like something that she's seeing in him. Right.
Right.
And now, like, the insults are like, they're comical. I should really read some of the emails, because I act as the intermediary now. She's hired me. That's part of what I'm doing as her divorce coach, is he has to email me, which really infuriates me. He's like, I don't have to. She's my wife. I'm like, she's your wife, but she doesn't have to take your horrible emails. So now he lashes out at me. It's pretty funny. So it doesn't matter whether the narcissist is divorcing you or you are divorcing the narcissist. He will be angry, hostile, and even enraged because his fantasy, parentheses, delusion, of how things were supposed to be hasn't worked out. And it's all your fault. You didn't follow the script. You didn't play your part properly.
Right.
You said or did the wrong thing. You are the cause, which makes you disloyal, untrustworthy, treacherous, and dishonest.
Right.
And those are all the things that he puts in emails to her through me every day. He says that. Now he says it about me.
Yep.
Your self-proclaimed coaching self. I'm like, oh, that's not even going there.
Yeah.
You know,
well, it's a threat to it's a threat to not his self-image, but the image that he wants to portray.
Yeah. And he's just ticked off that she drew a line in the sand back in April is really what it comes down to.
Well, she can't have any control that,
Right.
you know, that would allow her to look past the curtain that he doesn't want her to look past.
Right. Well, meanwhile, he said for months in the emails to me that no way in heck is he getting back with her, and he will be divorcing her, and we will be hearing from his attorney. Not.
Yep.
Said the man, not. It's now November, and he hasn't filed, and we haven't had any calls from the attorney. So, well,
yeah.
Yeah. My BS-ometer is going off. Like,
yep.
So what to expect when you're basically coping with the end and breaking up with these people? There's no mutual parting. Okay. A frequent hope and goal for most caretakers, which is the person married to the narcissist, is to have a mutual and friendly parting from the narcissist. It's becoming a cultural value and a sign of a successful divorce to remain friends. Use mediation instead of an adversarial approach, co-parent, and continue a semi-familiar relationship with your former spouse for the benefit of the children. And this author says, as a therapist, I am completely in favor of all of these goals. However, few divorces involving a narcissist can make these approaches work.
Right.
And it's very important for people like Cheryl, who wrote in, has written in a couple of times, to understand that.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a territory where you want to be you don't even want to be friends with this person. You got to get out of their way.
Yeah. And unfortunately, with the narcissist, too often the breakup comes down to the old, you can't fire me, I quit. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is they will never be left. They will create a problem where you are the problem. They'll create a situation where you are the problem, blame it on you. They will even do it in a revenge breakup fashion, break up on you and turn around and say, it's like they have to be the victim in a situation. So they're never going to sit there and have an amicable breakup because there's no victim in an amicable breakup and they want to be the victim.
Right. The second area of note is it's all mine for the majority of narcissists. And again, this is the case with her, even though it's a short-term marriage. For the majority of narcissists, money is the only sure thing they trust. So they want as much of it as they can get. Male narcissists who made more money than their female partners frequently think that all the money belongs to them in the first place. Many of them have talked their wives out of working, but during a divorce, they blame them for not contributing and working.
Right.
They expect to keep all of the assets. In some cases, all of the assets may already be in the narcissist's name alone, so it can be difficult to get your reasonable share.
Because division of property implies fault, and they will not accept fault.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Wait a second. They get half of they get half of the assets. That must mean I must be half wrong, and I can't live with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the bottom line teachable moment there is get a lawyer, get informed. Know what the laws are in your state.
With a narcissist, absolutely. And by the way, this in your instance with this client, you're handling a lot. You're an intermediary on the communications, which I think is great.
Yeah.
And you should do it with an attorney too, although that can get expensive. But
that's why I do it.
Yeah, which is why you play such a great role here. But the lawyer at least has to be a buffer between the two of you. You can't go through a divorce. You can't manage your own divorce with a narcissist. You should really get a situation where you have some buffer in between the two of you.
Yep.
Because, by the way, they'll continue to use the same manipulative tactics through the divorce that they use throughout the relationship, and they'll continue to be successful with them, at least to the point where you'll be disturbed and unhappy. So getting someone like you who's immune to their tactics and their thought process, or an attorney who doesn't care, they're just going to, do the law and be the intermediary. I mean, if you can afford an attorney for that much, great. But that's a lot of, and lawyers don't want to do that. They want to do the court battle. They don't want to manage your narcissist either.
Mhm.
So this is why you play such a great role, and a coach like you who can get in between you and the narcissist is so
Right.
valuable.
Right. Exactly. You know, you don't have to talk to your spouse or your ex. You don't have to take their phone calls. You don't have to respond to other emails. Like I've had some clients where they're like, "Oh, he'll never go along with email." I'm like, "Well, too bad. He doesn't have a choice. You don't
Yeah.
have to talk to them on the phone. You don't."
Right.
So you can draw the line in the sand and say, unless it's an emergency about the kids while they're with you, I don't want to hear from you.
Right.
And when they put me in as the intermediary, it's kind of, other than this guy, because he's a narcissist on steroids, most most spouses will barely talk to me because they know that they don't want to say those awful things to me that they used to say to their spouse.
And they know their manipulation won't work.
Yeah, they already know it's not going to work.
Right.
That's kind of interesting. So one of the things, especially if you're going through a divorce with a narcissist, is you need to deal with your fears. Immediately work on lowering your levels of fear and anxiety. Narcissistic rage is something awful to behold and can be terribly frightening to have aimed directly at you. The narcissist wants you to feel threatened and anxious so you can't think straight, especially during a divorce. Then you'll more easily give in to what he wants. And I've seen that with this particular person we're talking about. A narcissist believes that you deserve to feel bad for causing them to feel and look like a failure. It's like, all right, that's crazy talk, but that is their crazy talk. That is the way they think. One of the tasks that, like I said, I have people continually keeping a journal so that they keep track of like their feelings. Like, am I fearful today?
Right.
What am I ruminating on? And then we can talk about those things, right? Deal with them, turn them around.
Right.
The other thing that's really important with a narcissist when you break up with them is to disengage. It's the best way to protect yourself from a hostile narcissist. Yes, the narcissist hates that. I mean, it's so funny because this all applies to her.
Yep.
The narcissist hates that, but he's already in a rage anyway, and it is no longer your job to take care of his feelings. I just love how she worded this.
Right.
Now is the time to think about your own emotional needs. Lawyers consistently tell their clients to quit responding and interacting with the narcissist and do all communicating through them until the divorce is over. So it's kind of like what I've been doing, just because, I'm like a third to a fourth of what the hourly rate is.
Well, A, you're a lot cheaper than an attorney.
Yeah.
But B, you have better skills. Attorneys don't want to deal with emotion, and they're not, they're not going to play those games. They don't. They want to litigate the case. That's their job. That's what they do. But
exactly,
a coach will protect you, and a coach will deal effectively with the narcissist.
Right. And one of the other things that she talks about in this book is be businesslike. As you become more disengaged from the narcissist, you can start treating your interactions with him in a more businesslike manner. The narcissist used to be your closest and most trusted companion, the person who responded to matters more to you than anyone else's, but that is gone. He now sees you as the enemy. So when you continue to expect that the narcissist will consider your feelings or some of your proposals, you'll probably be deeply disappointed.
Yep.
And your requests will trigger his guilt and then the hostility. So don't be trying to navigate and be reasonable and, I'm just going to be, amicable. It doesn't work. You have to be very businesslike.
Right.
Right. And that's what I do when I'm working with my clients. When I'm acting as the intermediary, I don't get into believe me, it's tempting. I don't get into responding to the nasty, threats or, whatever personal insults they like to throw at me, which is useless.
And
I could, but
what they need from you at that point, and again, narcissists are all about supply.
Right. They need a supply. So if I write back, they love it.
Exactly. The only reason they're engaging with you at all is because you are still a source of supply to them. And barring positive supply, they will take positive attention. They will take negative attention.
Exactly.
So that's what they're fishing for all the time, negative attention. So that business-like clinical approach where you do not give back any emotional energy is they don't want that. They want emotional energy, which is why they don't want a buffer in between you and them, which is why they want to deal with you directly, because they know they can get those negative emotions, and that's what they're going to feed on.
Right. Well, and what really ticks them off is that I basically said, I will tell her any of this that she needs to know, and the other stuff, I'm not telling her.
Right.
And that just angers them. Like, I'm her husband. She, you're not allowed to just like not tell her everything. I'm like, actually, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I also have my clients focus on themselves, take care of themselves, right? Eat out once a week if they can afford it, right? Eat out once a week, get together with friends.
Yep.
If you've got kids, have family night so that you start creating your own positive family environment with that person out. And the sooner you start doing that, the better. You don't just wait until after the divorce to like try to do some fun things. That's ridiculous. Like you could die from the stress of this in the meantime if you don't take care of yourself.
Yep.
So some of the questions that she has at the back of this chapter, which is basically coping with the end. What elements of narcissistic rage have you seen from your partner? How are you still trying to rescue or appease the narcissist in your life? So these are the honest things that we ask our clients, right? What hopes are you still hanging on to that this relationship will be saved? What are your concerns for your children in the split?
Yeah.
What actions are you taking to reduce your fears? So you identify these things that you're struggling with, and then with my clients, we work on them. We turn them around. So every negative, I tell them what the positive to that is.
Yeah,
right?
Every threat becomes manageable when you start to talk about it and when you start to identify it.
Right. So we're not going to get through everything today because I just realized it's after 12. But the last part I want to talk about is letting go. Don't look backwards. You aren't going that way. That was a quote from a book.
Yep.
Relationships with narcissists frequently end no matter how hard you try to save them. We all know that. The end is often painful, exhausting, and generally upsetting. Whether your relationship ends, hangs together for months or years, or settles into a rhythm that you can live with, you will need to learn to let go of many of the expectations, hopes, and dreams that you had about how you wanted this all to work.
Yep.
One thing is change your perspective. By now, you understand that the narcissist views of the world, relationships, and of you are distorted. This is a great one. I guess we talk about it all the time. This is all part of the letting go process. Narcissists will always be narcissistic.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps one of the hardest things to come to terms with is accepting that the person you loved is mentally ill. I actually prefer to use the term emotionally disabled because it more accurately describes the situation. Yeah. I call it, a personality disorder.
Yeah.
These emotional disabilities are always there, although the narcissist can sometimes override them. When his false self is in place, he can appear quite normal, relaxed, maybe even funny and entertaining, and maybe even charming. But don't be fooled into thinking that everything is all right. He will inevitably reverse again. Always keep in mind that the narcissist is emotionally impaired, and be prepared for them to malfunction at any given point. The next one is overcome your fear of being judgmental. Many caretakers trip themselves up because they find it hard to make any negative judgments about other people. So they even feel that way with their narcissist.
That's why you were picked.
Right.
That's just one of the reasons why you were picked.
Yep. The next one is quit caretaking. I love that because it's just so direct. A major part of being a caretaker in this relationship has been the requirement to be the nice one. That you're the one that gives in. You're the one that always makes things right. You deal with any problems and difficulties in the marriage or the relationship, and you're always sparing the narcissist any anxiety or upset. So that would be, for example, when, this person's husband that we've been talking about feigned depression and laid around on a couch eating bonbons and popcorn and watching TV literally all day for like 9 months.
Yeah.
Couldn't even move a dish into the dishwasher or into the sink. The caretaker, of course, AKA the wife, was feeling like, oh my God, I can't, kick a dog when it's down. He's depressed. I'm like, yeah, well, if I'd known you then, I would have said, get him on meds. Like if he's literally clinically depressed, after being in a psych ward for a couple of weeks, then he should be going to, support groups every day, like not lying around on the couch doing nothing.
That's what makes you vulnerable.
Yeah, he's faking it.
That's what makes you vulnerable. You can't imagine a person would do that because
Right.
that's not your thought process.
Right.
Yeah.
You just make this assumption that it must be really bad for someone to be on the couch and never move a cup into the sink.
Last week we equated them from a thought process standpoint to addicts. And one of the things about dealing with addicts is that you have to understand you don't think the same way they do. Narcissists are the same way. You have to understand that they don't think the same way that you do. And a lot of times, so many people have been with narcissists, they ask the question, what human would do that?
Right.
You know, well,
She
a
said that.
narcissist would, because they think differently.
Right. Right. Exactly.
That's just reality.
Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
funny, we talk about this on the show all the time. It's like the honeymoon period, not making commitments to people who've been in a foxhole with them. The narcissist will show their stripes in a foxhole. They'll
Oh,
do it every time. It's just a matter of your personality and what you do with what they show you. Because a lot of us who are people susceptible to narcissists will say, well, it's just a bad time. You know, they'll be okay when everything's okay. And you miss those red flags. Pay more attention to those red flags. At the first sign of trouble, when they start prioritizing themselves over you and you don't mean anything in the face of what they're dealing with, that's a red flag. And it's something you have to come to grips with.
Absolutely. One of the other things that's important for someone that's trying to distance themselves, either to manage it or to get out of it with a narcissist, is stop hiding, tell others what you're going through. Caretakers too often feel ashamed, or they feel like they're at fault and they're responsible for the end of this relationship with a narcissist. You may want to hide and not tell anyone what is happening, or you may find yourself suddenly spewing out all sorts of horrible anecdotes and confidences to people you hardly know.
Yeah.
Neither of these approaches will be beneficial. Start sharing what is going on in your life with a close friend or a family member who you trust. You may never have told anyone about the odd, cruel, tactless, and insensitive behaviors of the narcissist. You may have hidden that part of your life because you were confused, embarrassed, or humiliated. So start telling people, start telling your story, and as you tell it, you're going to start to feel it more. You have to feel it to heal it. And hearing the words, which is what they do with me when we're talking, it's like that's when they start saying, my God, I just realized how bad it is. I just told you like 50 things. And that is validating, right?
Yep. Again, processing, putting this stuff into words is important.
Right. Now, the important part when you're trying to have this end game and stick to it, right? Stop showing your reactions to the narcissist, because I love that. Restrict your contact with the narcissist. Oh my God, I'm so good at this. Set real boundaries and limits. Okay. Decide what you will and won't put up with and stick to it.
Yep.
The third or fourth thing here is step away from conflict. Okay. In the past, when the narcissist was emotionally attacking you, you probably responded by pushing back or collapsing and hurt. It's time for a new strategy. Step away. The next one is protect yourself. You definitely need to protect yourself from the narcissist's negativity as much as possible.
Yeah.
And we talk about that later on. And change your life. Tune into yourself. Reflect on how you were vulnerable to the narcissist. Reassess your friends. Don't get stuck in the past.
Right.
Look at future fears. Like, what are you afraid of regarding your future? So you can tackle those and not be afraid to move on without this person. And reach out to new opportunities. Let go of the past and get excited about new things, whether it's a new job or new friends or, a new sport, something like that.
Yep.
But you have to create new things. And again, it could be a new house, a new neighborhood. It could be a new town. Could be joining like a tennis club. So maybe you guys used to play tennis, but now's the time to meet other tennis players, because you sure ain't playing tennis with the narcissist, right? Yep. So you've got to find other people that do the things that you like to do that maybe you used to only do with your favorite little narcissist. And that will help you create a new life, not on your own, but meeting new friends along the way and get a new support system with that.
It's been a great masterclass on narcissism.
Yep. So that's what we have for today. I didn't really wrap up quite yet, so I am going to wrap up a little bit next week. So
okay.
People like this topic anyway, so
because it's people who have been involved in it are devastated. It's a devastating relationship to go through.
It really is. It's a hard place to be, but you're not alone. I would have to say at least half my clients, if they're trying to work on their marriage or get out of the marriage or relationship, I probably 40 to 50% of them have some form of a narcissist in their relationship.
Yeah, or at least dealing with narcissist tendencies.
Right, exactly. So reach out to me if you want some more information on my coaching. I work with single people to help them date well and find Mr. and Mrs. Right. And then I fix marriages every week, working with couples. And then I also help people uncouple and go through a breakup.
And creating a buffer between both sides of a breakup is important, especially at the rates you charge as opposed to the ones that the attorneys charge. And they don't want to do that job anyway.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I'm like 300 to 400 less than an attorney. So there you go. Like a good visual right there.
Yep.
All right, Lou, thanks for putting this together today. It was so exciting doing this. I ask everybody to take this video, take this episode and share it on your Facebook page, because people out there that haven't told you that they are struggling with a narcissist in their life.
Yep. All right. Have a great time. Enjoy the past episodes here on the Coach Judith Facebook page, and share it with a friend. We'll see you next week.
That's right. Be well, be healthy, everybody.